All right, welcome back to Off the Crypto Cuff. We're your hosts, Jesse and Jeff, two friends having a conversation while having a drink. And then, as far as the conversation goes and the drink ends, that's how far we record. So tonight, I'm drinking, finishing up my bottle, Lowell House here. This is a little brewery, distillery, and winery that we went out to in West Virginia. Back in the winter. This is pretty good stuff. I really like it. I'll have to go back and buy some more because I finished that bottle. So just drinking that on ice.
All right.
What you got over
Pick
there?
me up a bottle while you're there.
Yeah, I might do that. I might actually buy everybody a bottle, like the whole
okay.
show. So that's what we talked about one time. What are you drinking?
I forgot the bottle, but Bubbling, the Caribbean cask.
Oh, the Balvenie. Yeah, I love that. So, all right. Well, cheers.
Yep. Cheers.
So not a lot's been going on in the news. We've been pretty quiet for the past couple weeks. So, we're just kind of had a few things we're going to talk about here. I can start. One of the ones I noticed that, this week, I guess Trump added the SCI altcoin to the World Liberty Financial Fund, that we have, that he's developing for the U.S. Looks like he bought $775,000 worth, which, of course, the market bumped on that because of it. But right now, it looks like what we have in the fund is ETH, WBTC, TRX, Link, AAVE, Move, ENA, MNT, AVEX, SEI, and Ondo. Looks like for about a total of buying paid about $346 million. Current value $200 million. So it's gone down about $150 million so far. But that's he's buying in right now.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of interesting to see those. Some of them I don't even know.
Actually, you triggered a thought, kind of like a memory.
Yeah.
Well, something did happen within the last few days. There was a project called OM. I don't know if it's a chain or a project, but it was involved in RWA or real world assets.
Okay.
And apparently there was a rug on it. So there's still a lot of speculation exactly what happened. Okay. So what actually spawned the thought was what you said, Ondo. And there's a lot of people on Crypto Wonder that actually thinks Ondo is probably going to be the next one to kind of go under, just because the way it's structured, the way the token distribution is. Mm-hmm. But I can't say for sure myself because I haven't done any real due diligence or research in it. So this is just hearsay. So take it, as such.
Yeah.
But, so, you always have to be careful, when making an investment.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like he bought in at like $720,000. So it's not a ton of money, but I mean, you and I is a lot of money, but when you're talking millions and billions, it's not a lot of money. But,
yeah.
But yeah, one of the things I didn't realize, and we were kind of mentioning off camera, was that I didn't realize the World Liberty Financial had its own stablecoin, USD1. Which is basically, I don't know if anybody's seen it, but basically it's a coin with a 1 on it.
So, of course.
Yeah.
Probably made sure it was golden color.
It is gold, yes. But like you said, a lot of people are doing stable coins now. Kind of seems like the next wave of sort of in the crypto stuff. But.
Well, I'm becoming more convinced as we progress, into this, future and more institutions and more banks on board, that their preferred token of choice for transmit is going to be some form of stablecoin.
Yeah.
So that's your hundreds of millions, hundreds of billions, or trillions of dollars of transfers are going to happen that way. Or they're going to send basically a simple ISO 222 message that's going to specify what the transmission is, and they're going to normalize their books based off of that messaging.
So you really think transactionally, like the over like, I guess what I'm saying, overseas, you think it's going to be like a stable coin? Or are you
No,
saying just like, are you saying like our level transactions of like you go to the store and you buy some gas and you're going to use a stable coin to buy that?
pretty much, but I think it's going to be
Yeah.
like, that, or it's going to be the ISO 222, and they'll normalize out the books according to what the message is. I'm going to send you this dollar amount in some high value. So you're going to add it over here. I'm going to deduct it over here. And we send these messages to basically settle out that the transaction actually happened.
Well, yeah, that's
So,
the
so
security aspect of it, right? The
right.
ISO. Yeah. Yeah.
And the thing is, though, is that really no tokens actually transmitted. It just is a balancing of an internal ledger.
Well, it's kind of what's how the world runs now. I mean,
Right.
nobody actually has money. Everything we do is, it's transactional. It's not even
Hmm.
not real money. So this is just a more secure way of doing it. Is what I'm hearing you're saying basically, and what I understand. It's because you have that the ISO kind of creating that security is what you're doing.
Right.
So,
And
yeah.
this goes back to my conversation that we were having last week is, what gives an L1 value?
Right.
It has to get used, for it to have value. So when people start saying, well, it has to have these high evaluations because the amount being transmitted is like, well, there's other things of value that could ride on top that aren't that token. It's just at that point, the gas, it's the fuel, it's what's being used to pay for the transaction.
Mm-hmm.
So that I'm starting to have, like, and not buyer's remorse. It's like I still believe in XRP as a project. There's a lot of potential there. There's a potential future, but is the evaluation or this dream that a lot of people have, is it going to be a reality? And it's like I really don't think so. And
What do you so expand on that? I'm not understanding what you mean by that.
well,
The dream or the value? Yeah.
it's got to be $10,000 a token for it to make sense to send 10,000 $10 trillion overseas,
Mm-hmm.
because then it takes a very few tokens to send it. Well, we're actually seeing where the banks are landing. The banks are going to land on ISO 222, which is going to be a messaging protocol to normalize books between each other,
Right.
similar to what Swift does today. Or they're going to, probably in smaller amounts, just send a stable coin of that amount. They're not going, the only thing that they're actually holding XRP for, if they use that as the technology for transmit, is the gas fee.
It's the transmit. It's the transmit. Like I think we've talked about this before. Is your stable coins are? I think the stable coins are what you and I hold as an individual for our daily purchasing power. Essentially, like that's what you're gonna use. Like we use now the paper money, right? And then for I don't think XRP is something you and I would use as a consumer. It's going to be something that businesses use, or somebody, or I guess you could kind of use it as a consumer, like, but if you have family over there overseas, instead of going to MoneyGram and saying, hey, I want to transfer money to my family overseas, you're going to say, hey, here's my stable coin. I want to transfer this much of that overseas. It's going to go from the stable coin to essentially XRP, and then transferred and then back to whatever stablecoin that country uses or they use in their wallet. That's my vision. That's what I see potentially happening. But
Yeah,
maybe I'm off. I don't know. It's just
I kind of have my doubts that's going to be the way that effectively is the dream, right? And
mm-hmm.
that's the way the
Okay.
technology's been sold. But I really am having some doubts that's the way it'll end up working. Because the way is like, if I have family or friends that are overseas and I want to send them value,
Mm-hmm.
I could do that without XRP. I could use any token, any chain to do it. And there is no permission required,
Right.
right? So the only reason to have these styles of rails is for institutions, right?
So what you're saying is you could right now, if you wanted to, you could transfer stablecoin whatever you decide
as an individual, I
directly
could.
from your wallet to somebody else's wallet overseas without
Mhm,
using any kind of in between
mhm.
thing.
Without any in between. If I have their wallet address, it goes directly to them,
Right.
and then they could use whatever exchange that they want, to take the stable coin I gave them to turn it into their local currency, or just use the stable coin I gave them.
Yeah.
If and let's go back to Bitcoin, right? So let's say that it actually could transmit, you know, and do a lot of transactions, and you had tens of thousands or millions of people, trying to use the network at once. Not going to happen, but you could say, I want to take a sliver of my Bitcoin and send it to somebody I know overseas because they need a little bit of cash. Now they have, that Bitcoin. The rail doesn't matter, because that's the idea of a permissionless network,
Mm-hmm.
because borders just disappear or dissolve in that way. The only way borders exist is because of institutions and laws that they have to abide by.
It's
And
true.
that's where
It's
these
true.
different
DeFi
rails,
basically is what you're saying. It's like
right? The more traditional finance, yes.
right, but I don't know if we'll ever get to that point because of the regulatory guidance stuff that we'll have to have.
We're already there. No, it's
We
just
are
like,
over there, yes, but it's
no,
very
it's just like, if I wanted to
a
send,
small
if I it's
percentage
like,
of people.
I have a Hedera wallet. If I wanted to send you Hedera, I could. I have an
Mm,
Algorand wallet. If I wanted to send you Algorand, yeah, I
but you
could.
have to know how to do that. You see what I'm saying? There's a very small percentage of people that are in this doing it, and I feel like as somebody who's somewhat technical and understands it, and we've spent how many years in this, you know, in this industry of stuff, it's easy for you because you've done it. But if you're just Joe Schmo off the street that doesn't really understand crypto and how it works and wallets and all that stuff like that, they're
If
gonna have a hard time with it.
Well, if you're talking about like the barrier to entry, we've had that conversation too.
Yeah,
And
no, that's what I said. Easy button, right? That's what we talked about.
over time, well, even for the world that I am seeing here, is
Mhm.
like the difficulty of getting into the space is, or the barrier to entry is reducing, and it's reducing at a rapid rate, depending on where you're looking. If you're looking at Ethereum and the Ethereum ecosystem, you're probably looking at the wrong place. I mean, I do have my biases, but it's just like,
Right.
I typically know the audience that is around me. So I try to find things that are easy to use, because if I have trouble getting into something, even if I can get it to work, the fact that I had trouble getting into it typically means that the barrier of entry, even though somebody could figure it out,
Mhm.
the barrier to entry is probably too thick.
Right.
If I find something easy, then it's easy to explain pretty much to anybody. It's just like, like my mom, brothers, wife, whoever. It's like, hey, look, you just install this app, you do this, you do that. Here's like the 2 or 3 steps. Boom,
Mhm.
look at what just happened. And it just gets that easy, and practically already is. We're just missing, just a few more steps, or simplifying a few others. It's closer than you think. And as I
Yeah.
said, is it's like,
I'm not saying we're far away from it. I'm just
yeah,
saying I think where we started with this was, do we need the XRP between transferring our stablecoin from here to somebody in another country?
and I don't think we do. What I think
Good.
will end up happening, and this is where ISO 222 comes in, because there are banks that will not hold crypto. They
Right.
exist. They will exist on the traditional system. The banking world, TradFi world, is going to ISO 222. Whatever that ends up meaning,
Right.
that's what's going to happen. So
But also
effectively, what
XRP is doing the same thing. So
right? They are well, they are designed to hold it, right?
right.
Whereas other smart chain cryptos could be added on to support it, so
Mhm.
therefore supporting. But either way, so basically, when you actually do these remittances from bank to overseas bank, it's not going to be through it's not going to be through a quantity of XRP of X value, and then you're going to say, okay, transmitting $1 billion over here, which is going to translate into whatever other currency on this other side. It's going to be a ISO 222 message put onto the XRP rail, sent, and now you're actually expending the gas fees to negotiate or to come to the agreement of, yes, this transaction actually happened. So very little XRP is actually used for that for those transactions going back and forth, the protocol. So it's not XRP that's actually going to settle this. So it's going to be these internal private ledgers that get settled through the ISO 222.
All right, but isn't I think that's where some of this too, like people get sort of in their head. It's like you're literally transferring XRP, but it's not necessarily XRP's transferring. It's like you said, the rail, or the exchange is that supports it, that XRP works on. The idea of any transaction that's happening with like any of this crypto stuff is that, and keeps it secure, is the fact that part of it burns off and it changes the I guess you could say the ones and zeros essentially from one end to the other, but the ISO is supporting that. This is I'm trying to think of how I have it in my head, but I can't really like articulate it. But basically, it's like it's the security of it is really what it boils down to. It's like XRP provides a security to be able to make these transfers happen using all these different algorithms, essentially, to in ones and zeros to give both sides the warm and fuzzy that they are secure, and this is. Yes, this is what's happening. This is what the transaction is. This is the correct amount. This is And there's it makes it so somebody can't be in a middleman trying to like grab it. Essentially, that's what.
Right, and that's what a decentralized ledger gives you, because once you put the message on chain, that message is now basically in that chain for eternity, assuming one, quantum computers either never happen, or B, the actual chain is quantum secure and the history is secure, so that way it can't be manipulated post. So yeah, I mean, that is part of it. Is just like once a transaction starts, both sides can see publicly what is happening for pretty much all of eternity. So if there's any discrepancies in the books, all they have to do is query the chain to figure out what happened when, to settle where the mistake in their books are.
Right. So what happens? I guess what happens when I send something from my wallet, let's say your wallet, and it's just, let's say, not even XRP, like say, I don't know, Algorand. You like Algorand, so let's just say I'm transferring 25 Algorand. Just transferring 25 Algorand from my wallet to your wallet. That's a transaction happening, essentially, like, right? So it's going over the blockchain. There's a sense of security with that. So am I burning off a little bit of Algorand when it happens?
I don't know if they have a built-in burn mechanism.
Yeah, I guess like that's the thing, is all these different chains have their different ways of securing it, right?
So right. Well, yeah, it's just like there's still a transaction fee. So no matter how the actual transaction fee is handled post, that effectively what you're talking about is the transaction fee, or the cost of the transaction.
The cost of the transaction, yes, exactly.
Right. And then and then whatever happens post. So for Algorand, especially with this last update that came from Node Runners, is that you'll actually get the transaction fees, that the accumulated transaction fees that are in the block that you're certifying. So if you manage to certify a block, you'll get those transaction fees. The other thing is that to do the final distribution, so basically Algorand is almost at full distribution. They're at their total supply is 10 billion. Their current distribution or circulating supply is around 8. So over the next couple of years, if you're a node runner, you're going to be getting basically a slice of that last couple of billion. And then once basically it's fully distributed, then the network will be secured and paid for by the transaction fees. So that's where the encouragement of actually running a node comes from.
Well, yeah,
And
right. I'm sure it's
very similar to other chains. I mean, some
yeah,
chains have actually become extremely decentralized, and some, are more centralized, than others. That's one of the complaints about XRP is because their node count's extremely low, and they say it's like, well, it's easy to be fast when you actually are centralized, but once you start distributing the workload, it's really hard to get the synchronization algorithms get a little bit more complicated.
right.
So there's always
So
criticism regardless of where you go.
if you think about it, I mean, this is probably kind of crazy to say, but Napster essentially was a decentralized
It was
kind
a
of chain.
decentralized file system. It was a
Yeah,
decentralized
exactly.
exchange.
So it's kind of the same thing. It's like essentially that was like the beginning of all this, if you think about it, because it's like people were hosting music on their own on their individual boxes, and people
Mm-hmm.
were pulling from it while you were pulling from, everybody was just kind of sharing it across the
Mm-hmm.
network
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of what, that when you have that's what these nodes are, essentially is they're being used to utilize they're being utilized to make transfers and part of the compute and all that stuff. So is that my easy for saying that? I mean, I don't know. I feel like that's kind of the same thing, right? It's like essentially that's what it is. I mean, the nuts and bolts, right? It's way more complicated, obviously, that with all the ones and zeros going on and the code that's happening and the security of it. Yeah, it's.
Yeah, it
I feel like
definitely gets.
I feel like you're giving me a little bit of a deer in the headlight. Like I feel
Well, no,
like simplifying that way too much. It's like
well, no, it the biggest well,
I guess what I'm saying
and
is
a
the
lot of the
concept.
math is just like straight up over my head, to be
Yeah,
honest, and
I'm
to be
saying, but the
fair.
concept is what I'm saying. It's
Yes,
like
I was
it's
like
the
the general
ultimate.
concept.
If you pull the 10,000-foot view, like the concept
Mm-hmm.
is sort of the same, and that's decentralized. We're just messing with different things. We're messing with money versus music. So
Right. I mean, it's just like money, assets. I mean, it's just like a lot of things can be and will be tokenized. I mean, it's like there's
right,
already tokenized real estate. There's tokenized energy by tokenizing solar panels. There's tokenized silver, tokenized gold. I mean, this is like really is a lot of assets are going to be brought on chain. And one of the coolest features about tokenizing real world assets is being able to fractionalize assets easily to be able to buy into shares, easily.
right.
I think we mentioned this a long time ago, but this is like imagining a use case is, I mean, and this happens, kind of a lot is this like a small village somewhere, in the world, minding their own business, not necessarily poor, but not necessarily rich either, but, they make do. And a developer comes in because they've got these nice views of what have you, and they build up these massive resorts from outside money, outside funding. And yes, it's like tangentially, eventually, the people that live there will actually benefit, maybe long term. But is it's like there's a lot of like downside, there's risks, and they really don't have a lot of stake in what was actually happening there. And they get to see this giant building that they could never go in because they can't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
But you actually flip that to where when the actual project is getting ground broken, you could actually fractionalize the entire project and then actually give the locals either give it or sell, at a good price, the locals a fraction of that structure that's about to go up. So even if they never go inside it, they can then, once it starts earning money, they could automatically, through their fractional ownership, start getting dividends, from that building. So
Right.
it opens up a lot of, potentials like that.
It's passive income, right?
Mm-hmm.
Basically. Yeah. Yeah, I think there one time there was it could still be around. I don't know, but there was some current crypto that basically you set up your Wi-Fi hotspots, and anytime somebody would use that hotspot for for internet of some sort, you would essentially get crypto, for doing that. It's like
Mm-hmm.
kind of like it's I don't it I mean, obviously that's not something that would work well for somebody in a rural area, but in the city, that's a good spot for that because you probably have people hopping on and off constantly. You know,
Mm-hmm.
just another way to make passive income with through crypto. But and I think that's what they're trying to do is like basically. I think what it is, you're just creating nodes by doing that, and it's
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So
I mean, it's just kind of the question becomes, where does the value start in setting up that hotspot? Because
mhm.
I could actually see is this like if you basically set up a hotspot and um, so long as you were doing it legally and you actually owned the internet access,
Yeah, I
but
think you could actually order it through the company or whatever. They
right,
would send it to you, and yeah.
um, but is like were the people actually paying for the service? So basically, the person that was connecting, were they paying for the service? So that's where the value start was through the payment, or was the actual payment through the ability of actually taking a look at to see what the people were actually doing when they were connected to that hotspot?
Oh yeah, I don't know how far it went. Yeah.
Right? I mean, you see, it gets shady pretty quick.
Right, right. I mean, who knows? I'm sure they weren't. I mean, I'm sure they weren't doing all that because that's pretty illegal. But yeah, it's. But I guess you never know. They could have been collecting certain data that they're allowed to collect in order to sell back to whatever companies
Right. I mean,
for
there's
demographic
metadata and other
research. Yeah,
things. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So that yeah, that was just I was a superficial level, not necessarily like deep diving into that. But yeah, I got where you're going with that. It's like,
It's easy to get paranoid
yeah,
sometimes.
exactly. Right. Well, yeah, I mean that's the whole thing with the airport's Wi-Fi. So a lot of people are scared about those because you don't know who's on it doing what malicious stuff.
Hmm.
So yeah, you had a couple other things you had brought up before we started here. What was the anything else you wanted to?
Um, but nothing really. It's like a couple of these are kind of mildly interesting. It's like Bitcoin hits a historic 1 zettahash. I mean, that basically is a lot of hashes per second.
So
Um,
explain that real quick.
so
Just
basically, Bitcoin security is basically determined by its hash rate. Basically,
mhm.
how many hashes per second it can
That's for the
actually
mining,
accomplish.
right? That's for the mining.
Yes,
Yes, okay.
right. So
So that's
basically, when
how
you
people are mining it is with the hash, the however many hashes they can
mhm.
conduct till they get.
Right, and
Yeah.
you showed me those little like $200 ones that may or may not ever in their lifetime get a block, but
So
you
that I
could
don't think that
shoot.
was. Yeah, I mean that was a different crypto. I don't think it was Bitcoin, if
It
I
was
remember right.
Bitcoin.
Was it? Okay. I know they had
Yeah,
a couple different ones, but
yeah.
I can remember the Bitcoin was part of that too. There was yeah, it was something I was like, oh, that might be pretty good,
It
but
was a
not I think it might have been that wasn't Ethereum. It was I can't remember. There was
it,
another crypto it made sense on because it didn't require as much compute to be able to mine it. So it was you could
I've been
actually
looking.
make some money on it. So
Yeah, I
go ahead.
was looking at Monero for that. Is it's like with my current setup, I could actually probably run a couple Monero nodes and theoretically end up right side up on it.
Yeah, I think the idea is that you're an early adopter to that, and
Hmm.
you're I mean, kind of like we've talked about this before, Pi, right?
Hmm.
I'm an early adopter in Pi because I'm doing the I don't know if you ever watched that show Lost, but basically I feel like this is what I'm in because I'm pushing the button every 24 hours to to
It's
mine the
like,
crypto.
you're still
But
there.
I'm still there. You know what? And it's like if it costs me nothing, 2 seconds of my day to push the button, and you know maybe one day it's worth something. So it's kind of I think that's how you look at stuff like that. It's like look Monero. It's like it's worth something maybe, but it could be worth more in the future. So it's
Well,
a
we'll
that's how
see
I look.
what
That's how I look at them at least.
well
Essentially.
we'll see what's ends up happening because Oh, here was someone that I actually lost this morning. Is they the SEC or the IRS, somebody, I can't remember who, basically pulled back on Tornado Cash. Do you remember Tornado Cash?
No, what's that?
This was one of those privacy. I think it was a mixer for
Mm.
Ethereum, to where a bunch of transactions would go in. So when the actual final transaction came out the other side, you had no idea who the originator was. So it was a way of anonymizing, basically making something that was pseudonymous actually anonymous,
I gotcha. Like
right?
True DeFi, yeah.
But I mean, that more or less legalizes a lot of privacy chains and other things
Mhm.
by actually backing off on the concept, because privacy is, a key aspect of humanity. If it wasn't, we'd all live in glass houses.
All the what houses?
The glass.
The glass house. Okay, I thought you
Right?
said something else, but yeah, okay. Glass houses.
um, so yeah, so there's Ethereum is looking at adding privacy features. It's actually on Algorand's roadmap to add privacy features, so you can actually send, receive, privately.
Hmm.
So this is not necessarily something that's on the back burner for a lot of people, which is one of those things that was, regulatorily discouraged from doing, and eventually, because like Monero is, by definition, a one trick pony. It was Bitcoin, but private,
Right.
right? So now if other chains start implementing these privacy features, they're able to do it faster, cheaper, all the other stuff. Monero is essentially kind of doesn't need fill that niche anymore, and doesn't do anything really more or more better. So it may eventually end up going away. I mean, as much as I like the project and the concept of it, it's just like having something that I can use and it has multi-use and the other stuff, and I can actually use it privately. That's
Hmm.
going to be a game changer.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole idea of a lot of people have behind crypto, right? It's just being private.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it's not just that; it's the being able to self custody. It's the auditability. So basically, it's kind of like weird saying it though. It's just like bringing trust into a trustless society.
Right. Exactly.
You know, because that's the idea is that you're going. The true vision of crypto is a permissionless society, because right now we're very permissioned. You go to a bank and you try to withdraw too much, they're going to ask you 10,000 questions of why you're withdrawing that much. You have daily deposit limits. You have this, you have that.
Yeah.
When
There's
you're able
a
to
lot of, a
actually,
lot of limitations.
a
Is
lot of limitations.
of your money. That's
Eh,
what's yeah.
Well, technically, I mean, it's like if you actually think about what those permissions are, at the end of the day, then it's not your money.
Exactly.
So once you get into crypto, especially when cryptos have utility, now you're actually starting to get into this permissionless concept.
Full
That's why I said
control.
it's like we're in a space where today is like, yes, I know it's not easy for John Doe, but we could transmit at speed of light to anywhere in the world at any time we want.
And whatever we want.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people say that caveat of that is it opens up to a lot of illegal things. So there was a
Well,
whole, I mean, wasn't there was a show for a while, like a series that came out for a show like they were doing crypto. I forget the name of the show. I don't know if you ever watched it. It was pretty good. I'll have to, it's I think it was on Netflix for a while. Let
um,
me go ahead. I'm gonna
the
look it up.
thing is that the criminality in crypto, outside of the oh, I can't remember the name of the site and the guy's name. Sorry, but he got pardoned this year by Trump. Um, the it's the idea that crypto spawns criminality. Only dumb criminals use crypto because it's not anonymous, it's pseudonymous, it's
Right.
on the blockchain. And chances are you either dox yourself to get the crypto or you're going to dox yourself on the way out. And basically, as soon as that happens, you're going to end up with handcuffs. Now, when you actually add in these privacy layers, does it make it harder for law enforcement? Sure. I am not against making it harder for law enforcement because there are some things that I would think are private and legitimately private, even for law abiding citizens. And does that mean that it makes it easier for criminals to do criminal activity? Sure. But at the end of the day, that's the price of freedom. Do you want cages for everybody? Or do you want the few people that are going to do the bad thing, regardless of what society says? It's like I choose freedom for everybody, and then we'll figure out how to deal with the bad apples.
Right. It's some people would very much disagree with that, but I do not. Mm-hmm.
Feel free to yell at me below.
Yeah, right, exactly. So Startup is the name of that show. It's an older show. Obviously, it's been around for a little while, but pretty good. Should give it a whirl if you ever see it.
Okay.
But it's kind of interesting, but they have a moment in the show where they're like, "We need users," and one of their big users was a drug cartel or drug ring, not a cartel, but a ring, essentially. So they were using it as a way of transferring funds, and they were like, "We're going to look the other way because we need the user base to help us get moving." So, but yeah, interesting show for sure because it's kind of new. It's been out for a while, so it was kind of new considering when it came out. I mean, I think it was 8 years ago when the trailer was released, so it's been a while, but pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm done with my drink. I think you are too.
Yep.
All right. So guess we can sign off.
I guess so.
All right.
Thank you everybody for joining us.
Yep.
Please like, share, subscribe, and comment down below.
All right.
Yeah, and you can find me on X at excalibur.algo.
All right, and I'm a ghost, so no Twitter for me. All right. Until next time.
Till next time.